Hey everybody! So we are going to be using the C-Roads online climate modeling program a lot the end of this week and all throughout week 7. Now, we walked through this step by step during Tuesday's live class, and I think the interface is pretty intuitive, but I want to make sure that there's no confusion. So I'm going to walk through everything again now. So you click the C-Roads link and you get to this page. On the right side, you'll see our best current estimates of global climate change through the year 2100. Now, the y-axis of this chart says degrees Celsius. 0 here means pre-industrial temperature levels. Now, you know that the Earth's climate has vacillated wildly over the Earth's history. And on the scale of like millions and hundreds of thousands of years, the Earth's climate goes all over the place. But on the scale of like decades and centuries, pre-industrial levels are a pretty good baseline for measuring temperature change. The two gray dotted lines represent what most climate scientists regard as sort of our safety zone, somewhere between 1.5 and 2 Celsius degrees above pre-industrial levels. Most climate scientists agree that temperature rises above 2 Celsius degrees more than pre-industrial levels would represent a cataclysm for all sorts of reasons. As with everything in climate science, there is a lot of back and forth about exact numbers here. Some people would argue that 1.5 is really your limit, and anything above that is already cataclysmic. We're running this thing as a simulation, so each of you, as your individual countries or coalitions, can decide what your climate goal is. It might be 1.5, it might be 2, frankly, it might be more. That is up to you based on your understanding of your country's positions. But as a general rule of thumb, we're aiming for somewhere between 1.5 and 2 degrees of warming. On the left side, you can plug in all different scenarios for emissions reductions. You have our 6 national groups: the US, the EU, the other developed countries, China, India, and the other developing countries. And for each of these, you can choose 5 values. Emissions peak year is the year in which your country's carbon emissions will stop increasing. Reductions begin year is the year in which your country's emissions will begin reducing. Annual reduction rate is the percentage by which your country's emissions will start reducing every year once the reductions begin. And then these last two, prevent deforestation and promote afforestation. The first is stopping cutting down trees, and the second is planting trees. And to be honest, this isn't really where the action is. We could set all these values to 100%, the maximum, and you can see it doesn't really make much of a difference. 0.3 Celsius degrees less of warming. So the real action is over here on the left. What sorts of scenarios you plug in is really up to you. So here's a scenario that gets us down below 2 degrees Celsius. I treated every country and group exactly the same. Everybody peaks in 2020, begins reductions in 2040, reduces by 3% per year, prevents deforestation 100%, and promotes afforestation 100%. Now that deal works, but is it fair? Is it practical? Well, you might say 100% for prevent deforestation and promote afforestation. That seems pretty unrealistic. Like, really? We're never going to cut down another tree? I don't quite buy that. Let's look at the fossil fuel emissions graph. If I look at the graph like this, I might say, with this deal, China's the biggest emitter and remains the biggest emitter basically through the rest of the century, with other developing countries in second place. So maybe they should be reducing more and other countries should be reducing less. But if I go to graphs here, I can get different views. And so I might say, well, look, China and other developing countries have the largest populations by far. Let's have a look at that. Other developing countries is this huge group. Of course they're emitting the most. They have the most people. Let's look at emissions per person. I go to economics again, emissions per capita. And now I find out with this deal, it's actually Americans who are emitting the most on a per-person basis. And other developed countries that are number 2. China's mostly number 3 here, and Europe's number 4. So I'd have to say other developing countries, way down here at the bottom, they're actually not the villains of this scenario. They're the heroes. Or wait, are they? There's another way of looking at this, and it's to say, how clean is your economy? How much are you emitting per dollar of GDP? Again, I can go to graphs, economics, emissions per GDP. This is emissions per dollar of your economy. So like, how clean is your industry? And here I find out China right now is the dirtiest economy by far. And it's other developed countries in second and the US in third, with the EU down at the very bottom as like the cleanest economy in the world. So how you judge these different plans really depends on your country's perspective and the graphs you're using. So you do need to play with C-roads quite a bit. So what am I asking you for? 2 C-roads scenarios. Number 1 is your opening proposal at the climate summit. This is your proposal that your country or your region are saying to the rest of the world, hey, here's my plan for getting to 2 degrees Celsius of warming, or 1.5 degrees, or 3 degrees Celsius, whatever your plan is. This is your public proposal. It might not be realistic in your opinion. It might not be what you actually want. There's a little bit of strategizing and poker playing here, but it's the public proposal you are going to make. Number 2 is the worst possible deal that you will accept. What's the absolute most that you, as a country or as a region, will sacrifice? The most you will give up. This is the absolute worst deal I will accept, and I would say yes to this one. But if they asked me for even 1% more reductions, or 1% more deforestation, or 1 year earlier beginning reductions, anything worse, I would say no and walk away from the summit. Now, your worst case scenario, your worst case deal will remain secret. Only 2 people will know about it, you and me. Your opening proposal is, of course, public. To hand in your scenarios, just take a screenshot of each one, give them appropriate titles, like, Joey, opening proposal, Joey, worst case scenario, and hand them in by clicking the hand in button in the block below. It's that easy. Any questions, any problems, get in touch with me.